Let's be honest, it hurts when someone you gave your heart to starts acting like you were never even there. When they pull away, go silent, or move on like you never mattered, it's easy to fall into the trap of chasing closure, trying to remind them of your worth, or waiting for them to realize what they lost. But what if the most powerful response is no response at all? This isn't about playing games or getting even. It's about reclaiming your power, because the truth is, when someone erases you from their life, you have every right and every reason to erase them from yours. Not to punish them, but to protect you. Here are 6 truths to help you let go with strength, and let them feel the loss that comes when they no longer have access to someone like you. When someone you cared about starts treating you like an option, or worse, like you never mattered, it's natural to feel a rush of confusion, sadness, even anger. You replay the moments in your head, wondering what changed, what went wrong, what you could have done differently. And maybe part of you still hopes they'll realize what they did, that they'll come back, apologize, and make it right. But here's a truth you need to hear. When someone shows you that they can live without you, you're allowed, no, you're expected to believe them. Matching energy doesn't mean lowering your standards or becoming cold-hearted. It's not about revenge. It's about clarity. If he became distant, dismissive, or absent, then you don't need to fill that gap with effort he's no longer making. When someone erases you from their life, whether slowly through neglect or abruptly with silence, you're not obligated to keep their space warm. You don't chase someone who walked away with indifference. You observe, you accept, and you match the truth they've revealed with your response. The temptation is to think that being the bigger person means continuing to show up, continuing to give, or holding space for someone who won't even meet you halfway. But being the bigger person sometimes means walking away with grace and not wasting another second trying to prove your value to someone who was blind to it. It's not cruel to stop texting first. It's not immature to stop initiating conversations or checking in. It's self-respect. Too often we think love is about holding on, that if we just give a little more, stay a little longer, or wait a little harder, they'll eventually come around. But love isn't about sacrifice without boundaries. It's about mutual effort, recognition, and consistency. If he stopped showing those things, your continued investment won't change him, it'll only drain you. Matching his energy isn't a game. It's a decision to stop overcompensating for someone who has checked out emotionally. You're not being petty by pulling back. You're not being heartless by detaching. You're simply responding to the reality in front of you instead of the fantasy in your head. That fantasy, the one where he comes back better, where he regrets everything, where he finally sees your worth, is seductive. But it keeps you stuck. What frees you is not his realization. It's your realization that your energy deserves to be matched, your love deserves to be returned, and your effort deserves to be appreciated. Matching energy means you stop doing the emotional labor for both of you. You stop interpreting mixed signals, justifying his silence, or chasing someone who doesn't chase you. It means you stop trying to get a response from someone who doesn't deserve access to your heart anymore. And it means you start directing that energy inward toward healing, growth, and building a life so full that his absence doesn't leave a hole, but space. Space for peace, for joy, for someone who chooses you every day without hesitation. So no, it's not petty to erase him. It's not bitterness, it's clarity. He showed you what he was willing to give. And now, finally, you're showing him what you're no longer willing to accept. Healing doesn't always look like what people expect. It's not always crying on the bathroom floor, or posting sad quotes, or loudly declaring that you've moved on. Sometimes healing is subtle, it's quiet. It's the decision you make alone at 1 a.m. to stop checking their profile. It's the way you slowly reclaim your mornings without expecting a good morning text. It's the silence you choose not because you have nothing to say, but because you've finally realized that saying it won't change anything. There's a misconception that healing has to be loud to be real. That if you're not screaming your closure or proving you're over someone through big, visible gestures, it must mean you're still stuck. But real healing doesn't need an audience. It's not for show. It happens in the small, daily choices, the ones no one else sees. The decision not to reply, the strength to unfollow, the discipline to stop checking if they've watched your story. That's the real work, that's the hard stuff, and it's in those moments that you quietly start to pull your heart back. You don't need a dramatic send-off to validate your pain. You don't have to explain to him how much he hurt you or why you're walking away. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing, not because you don't have words, but because you've grown tired of using them on someone who never really listened. Silence in this case isn't passive, it's active, it's a choice, and it's one that shifts the energy entirely. When you stop reacting, when you stop reaching out, something changes not just for him, but for you. You reclaim your peace, because every time you respond, every time you explain, every time you try to teach someone how to treat you better, you're giving them emotional power. And often, you're giving it to someone who hasn't earned it, who doesn't know what to do with it, or worse, who uses it carelessly. Taking that power back doesn't require a scene. It requires self-awareness. It requires emotional discipline. You'll know you're healing when you no longer feel the need to be understood by the person who hurt you. When you no longer crave a reaction, when their silence no longer sends you into spirals. That kind of healing is quiet but deep. It doesn't always come with a sense of victory. Sometimes it just feels like peace, and peace isn't flashy, but it's everything. Because when you stop needing a response, you start giving yourself the closure they were never capable of giving you. This doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you didn't hurt. It means you're no longer waiting for the person who caused the wound to be the one to heal it. You've stopped outsourcing your healing to someone who wasn't capable of protecting your heart when they had it. That's what makes healing powerful. Not that it erases the past, but that it reclaims the present. It puts you back in control of your energy, your emotions, and your future. Let them wonder where you went. Let them feel the silence that used to be filled with your effort, your presence, your love. That silence will be louder than anything you could have said, and it will say what words never could, that you've chosen yourself now. That you're done performing pain, that you're done fighting for space in someone else's story, that you've written a new chapter, and this time they're not in it. Closure is one of those things we're taught to wait for, to chase, or to beg for when someone walks away without explanation. It feels like a necessary final step, something they owe us, something we can't move on without. But the harsh truth is this: some people will never give you closure. Not because you didn't deserve it, but because they don't have the emotional maturity to offer it. And if you wait around for them to grow into the person who can, you'll stay stuck in a story that already ended. You don't need them to understand how much they hurt you. You don't need an apology to heal. Closure isn't something they hand you. It's something you give to yourself the moment you stop needing their permission to let go. Waiting for them to come back and explain why they disappeared or why they didn't fight for you is just another form of attachment. It's hope dressed up as logic. You're not really looking for answers. You're hoping the answer will bring them back. But here's the reality. If they cared enough to offer you real closure, they likely wouldn't have left in the way they did. People who truly respect you don't leave you in the dark. They don't make you question your worth. So continuing to seek clarity from someone who couldn't even give you basic respect only keeps the wound open. It keeps you tethered to the same cycle of confusion, hurt, and false hope. Being your own closure means you accept that you may never get the answers you want. It means you stop rereading the old messages, stop overanalyzing what went wrong, and stop wondering if you were the problem. Maybe they ghosted you. Maybe they gave you mixed signals. Maybe they made you feel like everything was fine and then suddenly disappeared. None of that means you weren't enough. It means they lacked the capacity to show up in the way you deserved. Closure happens when you decide to stop giving them the power to define how your story ends. You close the chapter yourself, not because you're over it yet, but because you're tired of giving energy to someone who already left the room. There's nothing dignified about begging someone to explain why they broke your heart. You don't need their words to validate your experience. You lived it, you felt it, that's enough. This is where your power lies, in understanding that healing doesn't require a reunion or a final conversation. It requires a decision, the decision to no longer make someone who's already walked away the center of your emotional world. The decision to move forward, not because they made it easy, but because you're done making it harder for yourself. That is what real closure looks like. It's not some perfect bow tied around the pain. It's messy, it's quiet. It's full of moments where you still want to reach out, still want to know why, but every time you resist that urge, you choose yourself. Every time you take a step forward without them, you prove to yourself that you're stronger than the need for answers. You don't need them to tell you why they left. You need you to stop following them after they did. You're not the kind of person who needs to chase someone to understand your worth. You are the closure, you are the final word, you are the reason this ends, not because they fixed it, but because you decided not to carry it anymore. That's how healing begins, not with their explanation, but with your decision to stop waiting for it. There's a deeply ingrained belief that love requires endurance, that the more you suffer, the more you prove your worth, your loyalty, your strength. We see it everywhere, in movies, in books, in stories where the one who holds on the longest wins in the end. But real love doesn't ask you to break yourself to be enough. It doesn't demand you lose your boundaries, your dignity, or your identity in the name of sticking it out. Your value is not something you prove through pain. It's something that exists whether someone sees it or not. When you care deeply for someone, it's easy to fall into the trap of overgiving. You find yourself showing up even when they don't, making excuses for their distance, believing that if you love hard enough, they'll finally understand what they have. But love isn't a one-person job. It doesn't thrive on imbalance. If you're the only one fighting for it, it's not love. It's self-neglect disguised as loyalty. So many people stay in situations where they're not seen, not heard, not prioritized, just to prove that they're good enough to be chosen. But here's the truth. If someone needs to see you suffer to realize your worth, they are not someone who should have access to your heart. You don't earn love by breaking yourself for someone else's comfort. That's not a relationship. That's emotional depletion. You are not more lovable because you stayed longer than you should have. You're not more worthy because you endured more than most would tolerate. Pain doesn't add to your value. It just chips away at your self-respect when you stay in places that continually make you question your worth. And the longer you stay, hoping they'll change, the more you disconnect from the part of you that knows you deserve better. The narrative that love has to hurt to be real is toxic. Yes, relationships take effort, but effort is not the same as suffering. Love challenges you to grow, not to shrink. It requires compromise, not sacrifice of your core. When you find yourself constantly doing emotional labor just to keep the connection alive, you're not in love, you're in survival mode. And no one thrives there. You don't prove your worth by how much pain you can take. You prove it by how quickly you're willing to walk away when your peace is consistently disturbed. The most powerful thing you can do is leave when you're not being loved the way you need to be. That's not weakness. That's clarity, that's strength. That's choosing yourself in a world that taught you to always choose others first. You are worthy of a love that doesn't make you question yourself. A love that feels safe, consistent, and mutual. You don't need to explain why you need certain things in a relationship. You don't have to apologize for wanting effort, communication, or presence. If someone makes you feel like you're asking for too much, they're simply not the right person. The right person won't need to be convinced. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough to stop hurting. It means you stopped assigning your value to someone else's ability to treat you right. Your heart is not a test. Your love is not a trial. The fact that you feel deeply, give wholeheartedly, and try sincerely, that's your power. But your strength is in knowing when to stop giving it to the wrong person. You don't need to suffer to be worthy. You already are? You said, explain the fifth keynote into 600 words without any heading or ending. ChatGPT said, one of the most painful truths to accept after someone pulls away is this. Sometimes the only reason they felt so comfortable disappearing was because they knew you would stay. You were always the one who showed up, who reached out, who tried. You filled the space. You made the effort. You made the connection feel whole, even when they contributed nothing but inconsistency. But the moment you stop doing that, the moment you stop calling, texting, checking in, or hoping, they feel something they never had to confront before: the weight of your absence. When you constantly reach out, when you're always available, you become a safety net. You become the one who holds the connection together, and often the other person gets used to that. They get used to your presence. They start to see it as a guarantee, not a gift. That's the danger of one-sided effort. It teaches the other person that they don't have to try, that you'll always be there no matter what, and so they stop appreciating you, not necessarily out of malice, but because they've never had to feel what life is like without you in it. But here's the shift. The moment you stop filling that space, the dynamic changes. Suddenly, the silence speaks louder than any words could. Suddenly, they're the one wondering what happened, where you went, why you're no longer reaching out. And it's not out of manipulation. It's the natural consequence of someone losing what they always assumed would stay. Your absence becomes a mirror. It reflects back to them everything they didn't notice while you were still there. You don't have to force someone to see your value. Just stop overextending yourself and let them experience what life feels like without your energy. That's when they'll notice that it was your check-ins that made them feel cared for, that it was your consistency that made the relationship feel grounded, that it was your love, your attention, your time that gave the connection life in the first place. It's a hard thing to do, especially when you've made a habit out of being the giver. It can feel cold. It can feel like you're abandoning something you care deeply about. But the truth is, you're not walking away from love. You're walking away from imbalance. You're choosing to let them experience the reality of what happens when you're no longer the one holding it all together. And if they truly care, that silence will wake them up. If they don't, it frees you from the illusion that they ever really valued you. This isn't about revenge. It's not about making them miss you just to get them back. It's about alignment. If they don't want to match your energy, then they don't get to receive your presence. Love should never be sustained by fear. Fear that if you stop trying, it will all fall apart. If that's the case, it was already broken. You were just too committed to notice it. Let them feel the void. Let them sit with the absence of your love, because the person who truly values you won't wait until you're gone to act right. They won't need silence to realize your worth, but if they do, if it takes your disappearance for them to see what you gave, that tells you everything you need to know. You were never too much. You were simply giving to someone who got too comfortable with your everything. Let your absence speak the truth. Your presence was always trying to communicate. And in that silence, let yourself find the peace that comes from no longer trying to earn what should have been given freely. There comes a moment when you realize that holding on is no longer about love. It's about habit. It's about fear. It's about the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll come back and make everything right, but healing doesn't wait for them to return. It begins the moment you decide that their presence in your life no longer serves your peace. Erasing someone who made you feel invisible isn't cruel. It's a necessary step toward becoming visible to yourself again, because the longer you stay emotionally tied to someone who couldn't see your worth, the longer you stay hidden from your own. There's a difference between being heartless and being done, between being bitter and being wise. Letting go isn't about trying to hurt them, it's about saving yourself. You're not choosing silence to be cold. You're choosing silence because words no longer serve a purpose with someone who never truly listened. You're not erasing them to pretend they didn't matter. You're erasing them because they treated you like you didn't. And now you're finally choosing to believe them. This kind of healing isn't loud. It's not a dramatic exit or a public declaration. It's the quiet decision to stop checking their feed, to delete the thread of messages you kept reading for clues, to resist the urge to send one last message, one last memory, one last goodbye. It's the moment you finally understand that closure doesn't come from them, it comes from your own boundaries. From the decision to stop allowing someone to occupy space in your heart when they've already made it clear they don't want to be there. You can love someone deeply and still know they're not right for you. You can cherish the memories and still walk away. What keeps most people stuck isn't the pain of losing someone, it's the refusal to accept that the person they loved may never return that love in the way it was given. And that truth is hard, but it's also freeing, because once you accept it, you can begin the process of reclaiming the parts of you that got lost in the chase. You deserve to be with someone who doesn't need to lose you to see your worth, someone who doesn't need silence to miss your presence, someone who recognizes your value in real time, not in hindsight. But you'll never find that person if you keep holding space for the one who couldn't show up. The person who made you feel like a placeholder, like a second choice, like an afterthought. You're not here to prove yourself to someone who already had a front row seat to your heart and still chose to look away. Letting go doesn't mean you never cared. It means you care about yourself now, maybe for the first time in a long time. It means you're not willing to bleed emotionally for someone who would barely lift a finger for your happiness. That shift is quiet. It doesn't come with fireworks or big announcements. It just shows up one day when you realize you didn't check your phone to see if they texted. When their name no longer triggers a storm in your chest, when you feel peace instead of panic, you're not erasing them out of hate. You're erasing them because you finally see how much space they were taking up in your life without truly being present. You're making room for your healing, for your joy, for the love that will choose you without hesitation. You're not being cold. You're just done carrying the weight of someone else's indifference. You're finally seeing yourself again. And this time, you're not going to look away. So here's what it all comes down to. You don't heal by holding on. You heal by letting go with intention. You don't need grand gestures, final conversations, or a clear explanation from someone who couldn't give you what you deserved in the first place. What you need is you, your clarity, your boundaries, your strength to walk away from what no longer serves you, even if your heart still lingers for a while. You erase them not out of hate, but out of love for yourself. You stop chasing, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about your own peace more. You become the closure, the turning point, the end of the chapter, because the most powerful response to being erased is not begging to be remembered. It's living in such a way that their absence becomes irrelevant. You were never too much. You were just misdirecting your energy. Now it's time to give it back to the one person who needed it most all along, you.